if you want to plug in.
No, it's fine. Have you got another paper copy? Have we just gone through this and then went to more?
I don't know why.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Can you plug into this one? Okay, thank you for turning up to the planning committee on today, Thursday 13th. And we go through the agenda. Apologies for absence.
Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Stootley and Davis, Councillor Thomas Vivian and Thomas Vaughan.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest, anyone? No, thank you. Minutes of last meeting with those who were here. Do you believe they're a great record? Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that. And then move on to the planning application. There's only one today, and it's John Young's Limited, 24 City Road, and I'll ask our officer to go through. No, sorry. Way you go. Thank you very much.
So today's application. Thank you. Today's application is at 24 City Road, and the proposal is for a flue that would be servicing the biomass that's going to be inside the building. So the site is an industrial site on City Road, and it's located within a mixed-use area with some residential and commercial uses around. The nearest residential properties are on Terrace Walk and also on City Road. Okay. Here are the nearest residential properties. Along here, that's Terrace Walk, and here are the dwellings on City Road closest to the site. On the proposed development, the proposed flue will be installed along here on the north elevation where the green square is. That's where the position of the flue would be. And these are the proposed plans. Here, that's the inside of the building, and this is where the boiler would be. That's inside the building. And this is the side elevation on the outside where the flue would be positioned. And elevations, this is what this would look like. So here we've got the flue here, which is about 7 meters, and we've got the silo here, and also there will be a loading fan between the north elevation and the flue, which will be here on the ground. So the proposed flue would be 7.9 meters tall, and it's going to be stainless steel. And also the loading fan is going to be on the ground here. Comes with an enclosure to reduce the amount of noise from the fan. And this is the site location, it's the elevation. And during the assessment, we had received 2 objections, and the objections had raised some concerns on noise from the fan, as well as air pollution from the emissions coming from the flue. And here you can see just a wider extent of the elevation. And this is the existing equipment outside the building. So the proposal is going to be replacing this equipment that you can see in the picture here. Okay, so as you can see here in the image, the existing equipment, it has aged and is not as efficient as the new equipment would be. And with the new equipment, the idea is that it would allow the applicant to burn their own waste on site, because at the moment they're having waste brought onto the site for them to burn for the boiler. But with this new proposal, they'll be burning their own waste, which would be better for the company, as well as just allowing them to be more efficient by reducing their carbon emissions. And in terms of impact on the surrounding properties, so this is just an image looking towards the residential properties on City Road. The nearby properties will not really experience anything different from what they're currently experiencing. In terms of noise, the background noise currently measured from the properties on Terrace Walk was like 46 decibels, and with the new loading fan that's going to be outside with the enclosure, there's not going to be any increase in the noise that's going to be produced by the fan. So nothing is really changing. There's no increase in noise for the properties. As well as in terms of air pollution, the new flue that's going to be installed will only be releasing really small amounts of nitrogen oxides, which is considered to be ultra low. So with that, that means that it's not going to make any reasonable change to the air quality in the area. So there won't be any increase in air pollution for the surrounding properties. And also with the flue that's being installed is taller than the existing chimney, which means that any of the emissions coming from the flue, they would be safely dispersed into the air without affecting any of the residential properties. Okay, so this is just the opposite properties which are closest to the site on Terrace Walk. And they would be the ones who would be able to directly have a view of the equipment. And this overall, the boiler has been designed to reduce emissions, to minimize the emissions, as well as just improving the overall efficiency of the system, of the extraction system of the boiler. So there would not be any more harm to the environment in terms of pollution or noise that would be increased from the loading fan that's going to be on the outside of the building. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Questions to the officer? I've just got one if I may start. If this is going to be used more, how much more will it be used?
It's not going to be used more, it's going to be used the same as the one that they currently have.
I thought you said they were going to do some extra work on site, so they'll take it somewhere else.
No, they're going to be burning their own waste on site.
Instead of bringing waste in.
Yeah, so currently they've got waste coming in that
Okay,
they use for
thank
their
you.
existing boiler.
Councillor Bergler?
I've got a few questions. I need to disentangle some things in my head. So, there is an existing biofuel burner there at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And as a planning committee, I mean, is that has planning approval, the fuse?
Can I say? Yeah. So I just want to be clear here that we are considering the flue.
Yeah.
The internal works to change the boiler do not require planning permission, and we can't consider the type of boiler that's going in or its use or anything like that. They could do that without planning permission at any time.
Yeah.
So it's just the flue.
But I get that, but it obviously has a section on air quality, and air quality is something that we consider under RDM and the MPPF. So, I think, so what's not very clear from the report is, will this actually be an improvement to the air quality, or it says like it's not very clear whether we're expecting it to be an improvement. It's my first question. My second question is, I understand that our own DM policies are sort of rather weak on considering air quality if it's not in an air quality management area. However, the planning guidance for the National Planning Policy Framework says that we have to give special consideration if there's a, what is it called, a point source, which I believe a biofuel burner is considered a point source of air quality. And I kind of like, first of all, I would have liked to see that covered, I guess, in the report, but then also could you just explain what consideration we have to give to that?
So we haven't got information about the existing flue. However, our environmental protection team can see that it's not operating very effectively as it is. So, and they have assessed the flue that's proposed to go in, along with the boiler that they understand is going to be installed. They've confirmed that if the boiler operates in the way that it should, with all the guidance that they would have to follow in terms of operating that boiler, then the flue that they are proposing to install would do the job of protecting against adverse impacts on air quality. So, from our point of view, the proposal that's going in is acceptable and it does the job that it needs to. It's very likely that it would be a better situation than the existing, but we haven't done an assessment on the existing flue.
Councillor?
Can I just quickly come back on that, because it's quite surprising, because normally
Question?
normally we're asked to assess a planning application against what is currently there. So it's very difficult to assess whether it's an improvement or the deterioration of the air quality if we haven't got an idea of what's currently there. Now, granted, it's likely that is worse, but yeah, it's just surprising, I think.
That's more of a comment than a question.
Sorry.
Councillor Chapman, did you have your hand up? No? Councillor Graham?
I did, but
Did you go?
if it's well, because I understand that, so we can't comment on the boiler itself.
No.
So, well, it nullifies my question.
Councillor Graham?
I think we have to comment on what comes out of the flue. So I'd like to know how the height of the flue compares with the height of the homes that are very nearby and in an air quality management area. How can we compare, if we don't know what the emissions are now, how can we make a comparison? I also want to ask about the fuel, because it is relevant to the emissions. So will the company's own waste meet all of their fuel needs, or 1%, or half of it? That's important for the traffic coming and going. It's important for the emissions, because a lot of what passes the waste is actually similar in emissions to burning coal.
Is that a statement or a question?
I want to go online to find the evidence for this, because I haven't got it all in my head. So yeah, the height of the flue, the emissions now compared with the emissions plan, and the proportion of their energy needs that will be met by their own waste and other people's waste. Thank you.
In terms of the fuel, the application states that the company would only be burning their own waste, so I guess that would be 100% of the waste that would be produced from the excess wood that they have. So it would be just 100% their own waste being burnt. And your question about the height of the flue. The image is reasonably higher than, as you can see in the drawings here. It's reasonably higher than what's existing right now on the chimney. And the dwellings, I think, the upper level dwellings, there would not be, if you look at the distance here, they would not be significantly affected by it, because it's high enough that it would not be affecting those properties, I believe.
Yeah, so it looks from this image as though we haven't measured the height of those dwellings, but it's quite clear from this image that the dwellings on Terrace Walk are shorter in height than the existing chimney, and the air quality and the flue will be taller than the chimney, so it will be above their windows.
Thank you.
Councillor Sands.
Quick question. The existing chimney, I'm assuming, has been surveyed and is safe, because it looks like the new flue is going to be fixed in some way to the side of the existing chimney. Is that correct?
It's going to be, I don't think it's going to be attached to it, it's just going to be freestanding next to it.
So it's self-supporting.
Yeah, it's supported by some other equipment at the base, but it's standing alone, I believe.
It may well be attached to the chimney, but I think we have to assume that is
Been surveyed.
It will
Yeah.
be surveyed, yeah. It's not necessarily a planning consideration, but it would be a requirement for them to make sure that what they're installing is safe.
Well, it's in their interest too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Councillor Young.
I'm just wondering what are the implications of our vote either for or against. So if we vote against this, knowing that they are able to install the new biomass boiler anyway, would the existing, would they be able to do that? Would they be able to install the new biomass boiler and use the old flue? Is that possible? And what are the implications of that? And I think I would be interested to know, is this definitely an improvement? If you vote against it, will it be that they will just carry on using the old biomass boiler and the old flue? I suppose what would a vote against mean?
So to answer your first question, from a planning point of view, yes, they could install the biomass, the new biomass boiler inside without the need for planning consent, and potentially use the flue that they've got now, or something to that effect. That wouldn't need any planning permission. There might be implications if they started doing something that was causing environmental hazards. There might be some issues with the environmental protection team, but it's likely that they would be able to do that without the need for any consent. They would. The fallback position for them would be to continue as they are. We understand that the boiler and the flue are very efficient and are likely giving out higher emissions than what they're proposing here.
Councillor Graham?
Thank you. So paragraph 20 says that there would be negligible harm to the Brackenvale conservation area and unlikely to have significant harm to properties. So can you tell me what negligible harm there will be and how it's been assessed as negligible? And also St Mark's Church, it's anticipated that the proposal will result. It's not anticipated that there'd be significant harm to heritage assets. That suggests that there will be some harm. And I think my last question refers to the Environment Officer's report, who says that if it runs as it's supposed to, it won't cause any additional pollution. Well, I don't know how big an if that is and what the track record is of this developer or of the industry or of the industry as a whole.
In terms of impact to the heritage assets, it was considered to be negligible harm because they're a reasonable distance away. So in our assessment, it was concluded that whatever happens here on site is not going to have an impact on the conservation area as well as St. Mark's Church, which is like more than 100 meters away from the site. So they would not at all, they wouldn't even know what's going on here. They wouldn't see it, so there wouldn't really be any impact. As well, the same would go for the conservation area, just because of the distances between the site and those heritage assets. Anything happening here would not really have any impact on those assets. So that's why it was considered to be negligible harm.
Okay, we've finished with questions. I'll move the recommendation is to approve. I'll move that. You've got a seconder, thank you. Move on to discussions now. Councillor Sands.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that is apparent is that we're looking at uprated technology, both the boiler in the building, which isn't under consideration, and the flue. And these technologies have been developed. A lot of people have sort of looked into the research behind these and the airflows and emissions and whatnot. And so I feel that overall we're going to see much more efficient boiler, a much more efficient flue than the old brick chimney, and therefore overall the impact is going to be reduced environmentally rather than increased, and so therefore I will be approving this.
Councillor Bergline.
It's a really tricky one, because I think if we were to see this as a fresh application where there is no existing already biomass burner, I would be thinking 15 times whether I would be comfortable to approve this. But there is an existing biofuel burner there, so my understanding is that the situation would be improved. My understanding is also that if we don't approve this, they could run the same system with a less efficient and less safe flue. So while I feel really uncomfortable voting for something attached to a biofuel burner, it's a really weird situation, and I think because they could run it on the existing system, that probably doesn't leave us with any other option. I haven't made up my mind, but that's my thinking.
Councillor Graham? No? Okay, I'll say something then if I can. As a local councillor, I think I had no complaints about this place at all. Nothing for the residents. They ain't talked about this at all, about the smell or fumes or noise or nothing at all from this place at all. I mean, St Mark's Church, that's actually where we got our Labour Party offices, where I worked for 7 or 8 years ago. You wouldn't even know this place is there because it's covered with trees and everything in the yard, so you wouldn't see anything from St Mark's from that way. You will see the flue from the other side, but you can see the brick flue, and I think if it's going to be a little bit taller, it's actually got to be better and cleaner. I mean, the chimney itself, I mean, do they sweep these chimneys? I don't know. I've never seen a chimney sweep thing come out the top on it when I've gone past. So these new ones must be a lot better for the environment. So I think all is good. As far as I'm concerned, I'll be voting in favour. Councillor Champion.
I think we're predominantly working on assumptions. I don't think there's been no assessment of the air quality prior to the event, so we don't know if there will be an improvement. I've campaigned with schools years ago, over a decade ago, to have a biomass fuel boiler installed because I was trying to reduce the carbon emissions of the school. One of the things it does highlight in the report is if it's properly implemented, I've forgotten where the wording is there, if the equipment, I don't know, if it's put in properly, the biomass boiler which we had put in that school was not put in properly, and it increased the pollution in the area, and it was detrimental to the environment and was a waste of money. It worries me that I'm on a committee where we're working on assumptions. We're like, well, this will be good for the environment, but there's no evidence to support that. There's so many assumptions, and also, nitrous oxide is an invisible pollutant. People wouldn't know that it's impacting their environment, but there might be increases of asthma in the area, but we don't know that. The lack of data I find utterly alarming, but due to the weak policies which we have to use to vote on, I don't see any option other than to vote this through. So it feels like a very hypothetical discussion based on assumptions without the data. So, yeah, there we go. So I will probably be voting for this, but not because I think it's fantastic, but because I don't see that I've got much option.
Councillor Bergman.
Can I also, I mean, when I looked at this planning application, I looked at I think it's DM11 again around air quality. Now, I won't be around much longer, but I'd just like to make it clear again.
Well, I hope you are, but not here.
But to make it clear again that I think it's an incredibly weak policy where we're really only considering air quality in an air quality management area, which has to change, which brings me back to needing to review our DM policy. But I'd also like to see the wider context addressed in reports, like the point source of air quality, which hasn't been done. So I think we need to generally strengthen. I mean, I saw a really good section on nutrient neutrality now, because we were forced into, even for things where it doesn't have any impact, to have a very structured way of dealing with nutrient neutrality with clear questions and yes and no answers. I mean, I don't see why we can't do the same thing for other environmental issues, and I'd like to see that much more going forward. That was a comment, sorry, but I just took the...
That's fine, comment, yeah. Okay, we haven't got our air quality machine just down the road, less than a quarter of a mile away, which do it all for the area, so there was nothing from that. Councillor Graham?
If this application is passed, then like you say, people might not see it, they might not hear it, but they will still breathe it. There's a lot of assumptions being made about it being more efficient and less polluting. I don't find those very convincing, but I would like to be proved wrong on that. So I'm wondering what air quality management they will be doing and whether we need to condition that. Also had a look at the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act, which is referred to on page 14 of the report. And it basically says that any public authority must take whatever actions are necessary to protect biodiversity. Well, you know, the people in the church, the school, the care home that are nearby will all be breathing it, as well as the residents who live closest. As well as the insect population that is declining at massive rates and not pollinating our fruit trees and all that. So if it were passed, I would want to be very sure and have air quality management seriously conditioned and the place closed if they weren't meeting the requirements.
Councillor Peake.
I work in a kitchen, we have flues. They're easier to maintain than a brick chimney, and once a year, usually, we have contractors come round and actually clean them all out. We have filters in there to actually filter stuff out as well, and they're far more beneficial than what the old chimney will be, so I'll be voting for it.
Councillor Young.
This is partly an echo of what Councillor Graham said, but just to emphasise, you know, we do have a duty to ensure that our residents are breathing quality air. If we are going to vote for this on the assumption that this boiler is installed and operated correctly, then it's our duty also to ensure that it is so. So we must have some condition in there that there will be checks that it is installed and operated correctly. We can't just assume it will be, we need to know that it is for the sake of our residents, whatever that is, air quality management.
Did you want planning committee members to turn up every week to find out what's happening, or?
Could you just explain what the process is for that?
That's what I'm saying.
So your question, as I understand it, is relating to applying a condition that would relate to the air quality in future, monitoring that. My problem with that is that our conditions need to meet the 6 tests set out in the MPPF. And those 6 tests relate to a number of things, but some of the ones that are alarming in this case would be the need for it to be relevant to the development that we are approving, and also for it to be relevant to planning. The biomass boiler itself does not need planning permission, and it does not form the development that we are approving. If the condition we're applying requires them to install the boiler in such a way that it doesn't pollute the environment, that's not something we would ever be able to control. It's not something that we would be able to apply a condition to control. Our condition would need to relate to the flue, and the flue that we've seen, the specification that we've seen, the specification that we've assessed does the job. So there would be no need to control the development we're approving here. I totally understand the points relating to the biomass boiler itself, and of course we'd like that to be installed correctly and for it to not pollute the environment, but in this case we do not have control over it, and any condition that we applied would not meet those tests.
Councillor Sands.
I hope what I have to say will put some minds at rest. Some years ago, a workshop I know had a sort of oil burner heater in the premises, and they became aware that regulations, rules from the Environment Agency were changing, and it made the system they had basically illegal. And so they had to take this out and install completely new equipment. And I do know from speaking to the people who run this workshop that other similar small premises had been investigated or not investigated, but seen by an environment agency, and their equipment looked at, and where it wasn't compliant, they were fined. And so I am reasonably assured that there will be checks and balances on the installation of equipment like this in any industrial premises. And if it is found not to be compliant, or for whatever reason they are not operating it properly, then the appropriate agency will take actions. And I do know the fines are quite substantial from the experience of some small workshops around Norwich that received such fines. So yeah, I'm confident that this will operate efficiently.
Councillor Sands? Sue?
So I've been listening. Yeah, I'm not on the other one. I've been listening to what everyone had to say, and it's been really useful actually, because it's given a whole sort of variety of views about it, and it seems to me it's come down to there's nothing that we can do about the boiler because that's in place and that's not down to us, that's not in our gig. It's not about the emissions, I'm guessing that's down to the Environment Agency, so that's not in our gig. So basically it comes down to whether or not we think that the new flue is going to be more efficient and do a better job than the old chimney. And listening to my colleague here, it sounds like that's more than likely the case. Sometimes in these situations it's really important to just narrow down to what the actual issue here is, and it's whether or not we should agree that the flue should be there. And if it's going to improve things, then yeah, I'm all for that, so I'll be voting for it.
Councillor Bergline?
Would it be possible to, at the very least, note that we would like environmental protection to make a visit after it's installed? I'm guessing that that is a remit of environmental protection, considering they are dealing with air quality and they have assessed that this would be suitable if installed properly. Could we ask them to visit on behalf of the City Council?
I wouldn't want to tie them down to doing that because I don't think that would form part of their normal work, and there may not be resources to do that, and we don't have control over whether they have the ability to do that. What we could do is we could add an informative saying that we would expect the boiler to be installed in accordance with manufacturer's guidance or something to that effect. There's nothing wrong with including an informative that would give them that information so that it's there on the decision notice. It's not enforceable, it's not something we would ever be able to call them up on in future, but it is giving that information for anyone to see. Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay, I think we had enough discussion unless anyone wants anything else. We'll move to the vote, and all those in
With the
favour?
additional informative, Chair, as discussed.
Well,
With the
nothing was
suggested
agreed,
informative,
but
yeah.
You need to vote.
okay. With that included, all those in favour, please show.
A recorded vote.
That's unanimous.
Oh, was unanimous? Excellent.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much.